Welcome everyone to this meeting. It is the Planning Committee meeting number 214. This meeting is being broadcast on the internet and the recording of this meeting will be published on the Council's website. Given the COVID-19 circumstances where we can't have members of the community here with us in the gallery, it's still good that we can share our meetings via the live stream. Council would like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung traditional owners of the land, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are part of the Greater Geelong community today. I would like to introduce to you the panel. On my left, I have Councillor Jim Mason, Councillor Trent Sullivan, Councillor Bruce Harwood, myself, Councillor Kylie Grisbeck, Councillor Ron Nelson, and Councillor Belinda Maloney. I'd like to introduce the officers that will be speaking today. I've got John Rush, who's the Acting Manager of City Development, Tim Webb, who's the Acting Coordinator of Statutory Planning, Shane Pritchard, who's the Team Leader of the Statutory Planning, and Patrick Spinazzola. Did I get that right, Patrick? Thank you. He's the Senior Statutory Planner. The procedure for the hearing tonight will be that the officers will present a brief summary of the written report to the committee, and then the panel may ask questions of the officer. I'll then detail some of the submissions made to the committee, and then the panel will have further discussion and application and then make a decision. The decision of this committee is the final decision of Council acting under delegated authority, and if anyone is aggrieved by the decision of this committee, they may appeal to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal in Melbourne, and our staff can assist you with this process during office hours. We've got some apologies today. Mayor Asher, Councillor Aitken, Councillor Murray, Councillor Mansfield and Councillor Contell. And I'd like to move and second the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting, dated 28th of January 2021. Moved Councillor Mason and seconded Councillor Maloney. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? Just wait for Ron to ask him. Any declarations of interest, Ron? No. Okay. So the matter we have before us today is planning number PP 973-2020. It is in relation to 212 Bailey Street in Grovedale. Rightio. So now I'm going to hand over to the officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Subject site, 212 Bailey Street, is a large site with a dual frontage to Bailey Street and Pickerel Avenue in Grovedale. At present, the subject site is occupied by an existing dwelling and associated outbuildings and services. Access to the site is available via two existing vehicle crossovers from Bailey Street on the eastern boundary of the subject site. The existing vehicle crossovers form part of a turnaround driveway with an existing street tree located in the road reserve, again on Bailey Street. No vehicular access is currently available from Pickerel Avenue, which the subject site enjoys a dual frontage to. The site is partially vegetated with a number of trees of varying heights and maturity, with most of these trees being located along the western boundary, Pickerel Avenue, and northern boundaries behind the frontage of the existing dwelling. The land falls approximately 1 metre from the southwestern boundary to the northeastern corner of the site. The subject site's irregular in shape and has a total area of 3,859 square metres. It's formally described as Lot 1 on Plan of Subdivision 426-404A. The subject site has a frontage of 50 metres to Bailey Street, the eastern boundary, 50.25 metres to Pickerel Avenue, the western boundary, a southern boundary of 74 metres, and a northern boundary of 80.91 metres. There are no easements on the subject site. The surrounding area is an established residential area of Grovedale. It's located approximately 530 metres east of Torquay Road via Smith Street and Pickerel Avenue. The subject site enjoys a range of proximity to physical and social infrastructure, the Route 40 bus, Grovedale Reserve and Marshall Railway Station, which is located 880 metres northeast. There's a range of other services and amenities that are described in the report, including Grovedale Primary School and a supermarket. The application before Council seeks a planning permit for the construction of 13 dwellings and a 15-lot subdivision. The proposal consists of the construction of 13 single-storey dwellings. It's proposed to subdivide the subject site into 15 lots. 13 of those lots will accommodate the 13 single-storey dwellings, with a common property access way utilising a northern vehicle crossover on Bailey Street. This access way will be the only access and exit point for the common property area that will service all dwellings. The remaining 2 lots of the 15-lot subdivision will remain vacant and will be situated to the south of the site. Proposed development is proposed to provide a contemporary design response with cuboid-built forms and a shallow pitched roof, and also to incorporate external-facing materials evident in the surrounding locality, including some rendered surfaces and weatherboard cladding. The dwellings are oriented in an east-west layout, set back a minimum of 5 metres from either Pickerel Avenue or Bailey Street. The proposal does not propose any walls on existing property boundaries. The proposed common property area, which is set in the middle of the proposed dwellings, would constitute 606 square metres of the subject site and incorporate 19 car parking spaces. This includes 4 visitor car parking spaces. Proposed lot sizes on which the dwellings would be constructed on would range from approximately 127 square metres to 175 square metres. Proposed lot sizes of the 2 vacant allotments will be approximately 637 square metres and 638 square metres. Subject sites within a general residential zone, Schedule 1, and no overlays apply to the subject site. The application was referred to Council's internal referral units and externally to the relevant utility servicing authorities. All relevant servicing authorities did not object to the granting of a permit. Council's engineering department were not supportive of the proposal due to the overhang of the existing street tree into the property boundary of some of the units on Bailey Street. It's noted that Parks Planning were supportive of the proposal in its form. The application was put to public notification with a sign on each street frontage and letters sent to adjoining owners and occupiers. 36 letters objecting to the proposal have been submitted against the application. 2 petitions were also submitted objecting to the proposal. There was no consultation meeting held. This was due to the number of objections received and the inability of groups to meet in a safe manner during the coronavirus pandemic. No objections have been withdrawn. The matters raised within the objections that have been received relate to, amongst other things, neighbourhood character, dwelling density, negative impacts on residential amenity of neighbouring dwellings, increased traffic congestion and car parking demand within Bailey Street, Pickerel Avenue, and an adjoining street, Diaz Drive, lack of environmental sustainability of the proposal, residential noise created by the development, construction management, and devaluation of property. The application has been assessed against the relevant planning policy, including the planning policy framework, municipal planning strategy, zone, particular provisions and general provisions of the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme. And it's considered that the application accords with the scheme by proposing a residential development that increases the density and diversity of housing on a large, underutilised site with unique opportunities in a general residential zone. It also is within proximity to a range of physical and social infrastructure. It's well serviced and in close proximity to retail, education, recreation, and the transport network within Grovedale. It's considered that the building height, bulk, form, and material detail will provide an appropriate design response based on those policy considerations and the advantages of the location of the site, subject to one modest variation of the 33 residential development standards set out within Clause 55 of the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme, also known as Res Code. As a result, it's recommended that Council advocate to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal that it grant a permit for the construction of 13 dwellings and 15-lot subdivision, subject to conditions.
Thank you very much. We now have an opportunity to ask any questions. Any questions from the councillors at this stage? Bruce. Thank you, Councillor Harwood.
What's the actual overall size of the block? 1,159 square metres. Only access being sought is off Bailey Street.
That's correct. So essentially, the access being sought is from Bailey Street into the common property access way, into a shared common property parking area that will service all of the dwellings.
Saying that, would each dwelling have its own driveway? Is that what we're saying?
No, so, sorry. Each dwelling would have its own pedestrian access from the street, either from
Right.
Pickerel or Bailey Street, but one driveway would go into the common property area in the middle of the property,
Right.
where the car parking area is.
Mason?
Thank you for your very clear and good presentation. I've got a couple of questions, please. I haven't quite followed what happens to the 13 plus 2, the the two vacant blocks. They're located on one side?
So the two vacant allotments are located at the south of the subject site, so along the southern boundary, and essentially, one fronts Bailey Street and one fronts Pickerel Avenue.
So it can't be predicted what those blocks will be used for?
So under this application, they've sought the subdivision of those two lots into a 630 square metre lots. With respect to the general residential zone, with development, we have a requirement, the planning scheme has a requirement of 500 square metres. So under 500 square metres, they are required to provide development plans. Because they're proposing a lot size for those two lots that are over 500 square metres, there's no requirement for them to provide development plans with respect to those two lots. So in terms of the application before us, council has considered those two lots being subdivided off, but essentially the future of those lots is up to the relevant owner of those lots.
Could, theoretically, those two lots become 4 lots?
In theory, obviously that's not necessarily something that's before myself in the assessment of the application, but in theory, development plans could be lodged for any proposal on those lots. Looking at the constraints of the application before council, obviously it's unlikely that it really is up to the owner of those lots what they would like to do.
Thank you. And with your indulgence, Chair, I was very pleased a couple of years ago to see environmentally sustainable design enter our fray. And I note ESD's language is used in the papers tonight. And seems to me a number of new parameters are being used. I'm not sure, but is that right? Or recent parameters for environmentally sustainable design?
That referring to new tools of assessment, just so I understand.
Well, look, I'll diverge from that question. Maybe it's too technical. But what I'm interested in is the fact that there's been a lot of compliance with environmentally sustainable design, yet there's still light problems. There's light problems in some areas, and in fact the recommendation is in this day and age with renewable energy, etc., we should use air conditioners to fix the problem. So I'm surprised that that's the solution.
With respect to the application's compliance with the local policy for ESD, Clause 2271, those conditions have been provided by Council's ESD unit to ensure that the application is in compliance with that local policy. With respect to energy efficiency and light, there's a condition on the permit, condition 1G has been recommended to ensure that skylights are proposed so that all dwellings in their living areas will have access to northern light. That was the intention of that condition, and also to provide a revised sustainability management plan. Also with respect to the dwellings themselves, all rear private open space areas, secluded private open space areas will face north to allow for energy efficiency and light to come into those areas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you. I noticed there's a letter of correspondence from James Brisella to Self Patrick. Have you got a copy of that?
The most recent letter of correspondence.
The applicant?
22nd of March.
22nd of March.
It's response or one of the objectors' submissions?
Oh, yeah, that's the applicant.
That is correct. Yep. So that's the next part when we get to their submission in relation to this planning committee, because they can't actually physically be here.
I understand it, but there's just I guess. It starts off basically saying that I would just like to reiterate that I would be open to modifications of the design, including varied facades, and we're willing to complete additional street planting. Does that open up a discussion for potentially reducing the number of units at this point?
With respect to the reduction of number of units, it was informally discussed with the applicant early on, just how they'd come to that perspective, and there was no consideration to reducing the amount of units. With respect to that, was my understanding of that. It was more regarding they were willing to make changes to the units themselves, but not necessarily reduce the amount of units.
Thank you. I've got a question for you. In relation to that sunlight issue, there is a reference in the document around B10, that clause B10, and it says there that one of the units doesn't comply with that sunlight direction in relation, and that's why I think that's what Councillor Mason was referring to around air conditioning and heating. They needed to have a specific, there was a specific call out. Would you mind just explaining to us what that specific call out was in relation to B10, clause B10? And I don't have the specific page number. I've moved off that at the moment.
That's okay. I'm looking on page 59 of my report. With respect to clause standard B10, it's considered that all the private open space areas will receive northern light and have a northern aspect, and it's considered that that will go some way to addressing the lack of north-facing windows in the dwellings that do not have them. It's also tempered by the fact that there are east and west facing windows available in the living areas. So obviously you'll get sunlight at both ends of the day, given the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and that will be available to the areas that don't necessarily have north light. Then with respect to the amended plans condition that provide the skylight, so essentially they'll be able to have the east light in the morning, the north light in the middle of the day, and then the west light in the evening.
And then back to the question that Councillor Mason was asking around those extra lots. I read in the documents that there is no boundary walls to be sort of solid wall on the boundary for except within the development, not for the neighbours. So those particular blocks show quite a hard edge to the... Is there a gap between the hard edge of the units to that spare block on that side?
No, there's not a gap between, but obviously should the future owners of those blocks wish to develop their own dwelling, they may wish to design their dwelling around that existing site constraint.
So when they say so within their development there is no hard borders to current neighbours, but they are creating a hard border to those two extra subdivided blocks that will remain empty at this point.
The wall on boundary standard, and that's on page, pardon me, page 64 of my report refers to existing property boundaries. So this property boundary is being created by way of this application. So whilst it will be on the boundary of a future allotment, it's not something that we're able to consider under the mechanism of this assessment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harwood?
I'll apologise now for what may seem... I've obviously missed something here, so I apologise. But the recommendation leads to advocate to VCAT, so this is already past a state and that's why. Okay, so it's already in VCAT. It's just a matter of what council decision may go to VCAT.
That's correct.
This is the first time I've ever encountered this.
Other side, is that right? Is that what?
Correct, Councillor Nelson. Yeah.
No, I get that bit, but I've not seen
Just didn't get there
in this
quick enough.
forum. Yeah.
We've had quite a few recently,
Yeah, we
Councillor
have.
Harwood, which have because it was called into planning committee, have automatically just gone straight to VCAT without our decision already being made, which is ordinary.
I've got to get out more
Yeah,
clearly. but thank you.
yeah. Any other further questions at this point of the officers? Yes, Councillor Maloney.
Thank you. On page 39, it suggests 36 objections and 1 petition lodged, but you mentioned there was a second petition. Is that correct?
Yes, that was an error on my part in completing the report. So there was a second petition circulated.
How many entries in total? Or?
My understanding was that there are 36 objections, and then each petition has a number of signatures on it.
Do you have any details on the second one? Just so I've
Certainly. So with regards to the first petition, that has 279 signatures, and the other petition has approximately 20 signatures.
To be clear, we've got 2 petitions and 36 objections, and a total in the 2 petitions put together over 300. Would that be right? 200 and sort of 250 to 280 amount of signatures in the petitions. Okay, that's just
that would be correct.
Okay, Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can't read it because it's probably not big enough, or I'm too old, or one of the both, or I don't know. How wide is the frontage on Bailey Street minus the driveway?
Proposed driveway.
Oh, sorry, the proposed driveway.
The frontage on Bailey Street minus the proposed driveway, should the driveway be constructed looking at the conditions to engineering standards, approximately 44 metres, 44 to 45 metres.
I'm just thinking on bin day, there's going to be 26 bins out there, 44 metres. It's going to be pretty full.
And that then raises that question, is there a separate waste? This is going to be part of, so council's going to collect the waste
Yeah, they're asking everyone to walk both bins all the way out onto the street. That's right, isn't it?
With regard to, I'll address the 2 questions separately. With regards to on bin collection day, as you might can see on the plans, so there are 6 dwellings that front Bailey Street alone, and then 7 dwellings that front Pickerel Avenue alone. So each 6 of the dwellings would present their bins to Bailey Street, and then 7 of the dwellings would present their bins to Pickerel Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So with regard to that, that's sort of how bins will be presented. Council's Waste Services Unit have considered the application by way of referral, and they were supportive of the bin solution.
Well, I was just down there the other day at school time, and it was extremely tight down there. I imagine that many extra cars and car movements. I think it'd be a little problematic. It says that it's medium density. What is the definition of medium? Is there a land size for medium density?
Medium density, with respect to the planning scheme, is spoken about more of a numerical kind of value. So that would be 20 to 40 dwellings per hectare. So the development as a whole is 38 dwellings per hectare, inclusive of the vacant lots.
Medium was, can you just repeat that? So medium in the planning scheme is around how many?
20 to 40
20
dwellings
to 40?
per
And this
hectare.
sits at 38.
38
So it's
across
right
the
on
whole of the
limit
site.
to high density.
Pardon?
So it's right on the limit then to being high density.
Yeah, high density would be more than 40.
40, yep.
And so it's probably worth noting the exact definition of medium density is not contained in the planning scheme. There's other documents like the housing strategy, and the actual definition of medium density has changed over time as areas grow and develop. And so there is a broad range, but certainly, there's a number of lots here of a smaller size.
Like good character vibe, as Councillor Harwood would put it. Didn't see that sort of development down there at all. And I only saw, in the letter, the applicant says he can build a triple-storey place if he likes. And I only saw one double-storey house down there. So I'm just questioning the neighbourhood character of the application. Thanks.
I might go to the next section and read out both the written submissions that were for the purposes of this committee from both the applicant and one of the objectors. So, as we stated before, 36 objections were received following advertising, and a petition was also tabled by Councillor Maloney at a recent council meeting, and then that we determined just under 300 signatures with the 2 petitions. The first written submission was received by an objector, so I'll read that. That's from Brad Folletta, and I'm paraphrasing. There'd be a proposed narrow dwelling frontages, boundary to boundary development. Continuous built form is out of character for the area and indicative of an overdevelopment of the site. The development design is to comply only with the minimum permissible requirements allowed under the Res Code Clause 55 and fails to consider neighbourhood character or future amenity for the occupants. The visitor parking is located too far from the vehicle access to the site, which will be hard to identify for visitors and likely to result in on-street parking. Unit 13 and 7 both fail to provide car parking in accordance with clause 52.06, and due to the extent of the overdevelopment can't provide a 500 metre setback from the boundary fence. In the applicant's submissions, I'm just summarising again from the applicant. So the applicant notes that the land is in a zone that allows triple-storey development and could allow for a significantly larger design on site with a 3 or 4 bedroom dwellings. The applicant says he only has proposed single-storey development which will ensure the character of the area is retained. The applicant would be open to modifications, which Councillor Harwood mentioned before, including to the design varied facades, and would be willing to complete additional tree planting at the applicant's cost. The applicant also notes that these houses will provide affordable, high-quality housing facing a street in an established area close to train station and supermarket. This development will therefore also assist Council in meeting its expectations of the recently approved Social Housing Plan 2020 to 2041, which seeks to provide a significant level of low-cost housing to meet an already deficient supply of such housing in Geelong. So that's just summarising one of the 2 of the submissions, one from the applicant and one for an objector. So any further questions from councillors at this point? I have one other further question. I'm just going to go back to my sheet. The question that I was going to ask was, given what I would call a large number of objections to this planning application, there wasn't the ability obviously to meet in person with the applicant and the objectors, but was there any type of consideration to how they would address those objections?
In terms of that, essentially, as you've quite rightly explained, there was no ability, given the coronavirus and our coronavirus safety plans, for an in-person meeting to take place. However, all of the objections were forwarded on to the applicant to respond to, and that they did so and provided responses to all of the objections and considered all of the objections.
Was there any changes made post those objections? Any application plan changes?
Not after the advertising period.
Okay, any other further questions from officers from councillors? Okay, so I'm going to ask our councillors up here, is there anyone prepared to move a recommendation? Excellent. So Councillor Maloney has just said that she would like to move an alternate recommendation. Councillor Maloney, would you like to just quickly read that alternate recommendation? And I'll need a seconder, Councillor Nelson. Thank you.
The alternate recommendation is that the responsible authority, having considered all matters which the Planning and Environment Act 1987 requires it to consider, recommends that the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal to refuse to grant a planning permit for the construction of 13 dwellings and 15 lot subdivision of 212 Bailey Street, considering the following points. Number one, the proposed dwelling density is excessive and inconsistent with the objectives of Clause 21.063, urban consolidation. Point two, the proposal is inconsistent with the purpose of Clause 32.08, general residential zone, Schedule 1. Point three, the proposal is insufficiently responsive to the objectives of Clause 55, Res Code. Point four, the proposal is contrary to the objectives of the Clause 18.02 for S car parking in particular. And point five, the proposal is not consistent with Clause 65 decision guidelines.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney. Would you like to talk to that motion?
Having chatted with the residents of the area, I can understand that they're concerned with this particular planning submission. The majority of the consideration, I guess, was with respect to the neighbourhood character and the density, given the nature of the street being quite populous, especially as Councillor Nelson referred to at school time, and there was potential danger cited with the increased amenity to the area.
Councillor Maloney. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I certainly support Councillor Maloney's alternate recommendation. As I said, I was down there the other day at school time and I parked the car and just sat there and tried to picture all those cars coming in and out of that one driveway, or one proposed driveway, and council building roads the way they do or did in that certain area. It's a very narrow road, and cars are having to stop and go and stop and go, and it's quite problematic already. And I think that traffic would cause an unreasonable amount of vehicle movements. The density bothers me as well. Yes, we need more social housing, but I think that area itself is reasonably affordable south of the river. It's one of the cheapest suburbs south of the river. So I don't think putting 13 units on there is going to assist that much. But bearing in mind this is already off to VCAT, so this is a message to the residents and everyone else that put an objection in. Watch this space, because council did object to it. We are objecting to it. Hopefully we'll get the support of my fellow councillors, but it's off to VCAT now, so that it's in the hands of VCAT, and hopefully my fellow councillors will support Councillor Maloney and myself in objecting to this for those very reasons. But as I said, it's off to VCAT, so watch this space.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to support the recommendation, but I'm nervous insofar as in a couple of areas. One is what level the applicant is prepared to go to negotiate. I'd like to read out that I would be open to modifications. That to me is, it's perhaps an opportunity to further negotiate what may be on the site. And I don't know what forum that can take place in now, whether that is a pre-VCAT discussion or a discussion during VCAT, I don't know. I'm just saying that does make me a little hesitant. And in relation to the social housing plan, that's a discussion that we as councillors have been having for some time about the need for greater social housing opportunity. And I think this is a great opportunity, this particular site, what's around it, it sort of, as they say, ticks the boxes. And I think to that end, it's a great site. But I'm just not convinced of having that many dwellings on it, and I'm not convinced what may happen to the two other sites, which is a total of around about just under 1,300 square metres. So without knowing or having some idea what the future of that might be, makes me nervous, as well as to what potentially could exist on the proposed site. And again, I think we want to give that opportunity, but I think this, for me, looks prime for investors, as opposed to those who might want to get into the market. Just how my read of it, but I think at this point I'm going to support the alternate recommendation, but I think this has a real opportunity. I just don't know that we've actually got it to the point where I think that in my own view, that I'm comfortable to tick it off.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I too am cognizant of the need for social housing and affordable housing and diversity. Though it worries me how this appears to be maximised with further opportunities in the future that are ill-defined, I know. I'm also aware of the and concerned that we really need to emphasise environmentally sustainable design and not cut corners at this time. I'd like to see the highest of standards in that, and I don't think they've been met. Certainly good attempts have been made, but not the ultimate. And above all, I'm sort of disappointed really that during this critical period of COVID, it appears to me, I emphasise the word appears, that an opportunity has been taken not to consult deeply enough. So I think it's a pity that it's in VCAT at this point, when maybe some things could have been done in a normal negotiation process. Thank you.
Mason. I'd just like to say a couple of things. From sounds of the objectors, from what I've heard and what I have seen, I went out there as well to have a look. I think that the narrow-built form of the potential, what I would call units, don't really fit with the character of that area, and you notice quite, what I would call a block and a single house. There are some sort of unit developments within there, but these are quite different to what would be there, and I think that's in terms of where the objectors are coming from, in terms of it just doesn't fit the neighbourhood character. I think the parking makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I think you will get a lot of on-street parking, and as Councillor Nelson has already said, that road is quite busy, and Councillor Maloney during school time. And I know there is a lot of services that are there in terms of schools and sporting facilities, but I think it just provides an extra lot of traffic that doesn't really need to be there. I'm for the social housing and development, but I'm yet to see an application that really suits the character of the neighbourhood with these tiny types of houses. I think we have a long way to go in terms of being able to get something that really suits that area, that can provide that sort of affordable housing. I think I'm uncomfortable, like Councillor Harwood and the others that have said around those two lots that we don't necessarily know what is going there, and that development. It worries me as to what we might see on those blocks, and I think that as Councillor Mason has said, I think the lack of the ability to interact with the objectors or the people that have signed the petition from the applicant, there has been many ways in which we have overcome that in the last 12 months, whether it be by electronic means or by letter. I think that there was ample opportunity for some of those objections to be either noted or things changed. There was quite a lot of that sort of stuff that could be small changes that I don't think the applicant, from what I can see from the documents and what I hear, I don't think the applicant has made a large enough effort with the community that sits around it. So on that note, I'll be supporting the alternate recommendation. So with no other further comments, I'll put the alternate recommendation to the vote. So all those in favour of the alternate recommendation? Oh, sorry, Belinda, you got to... I'm so out of this chair stuff. Thank you, Belinda. Would you like to close? Nothing further. Thank you. I'll put the alternate recommendation to the vote. All those in favour of the alternate recommendation? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you very much to the officers for your time tonight, and thank you for watching from home. We'll see you next time. Thank you.